Welcome to Pencils Down, a Finalis podcast. This is a show for listeners wanting to learn more about the ins and outs of the private securities brokerage landscape. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with the world's leading investment bankers, placement agents, capital providers, startup CEOs, and more. And with that, let's get into the show. All right, Chad Harding, thanks so much for joining us here on the Pencils Down podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
It's so great to have you on. I know we've been talking on and off now over the last number of years, and I've just had such a joy watching you and the Peak team continue to thrive. I usually like to start out these podcasts by asking our guests to share a little bit about their backgrounds and their eventual paths into investment banking. Really curious to learn more about that story that led you to your current position as managing partner of Peak.
Yeah, it's a non-conventional path, and certainly not the most direct way to get to where I am. But I thought it was definitely an interesting path that has helped me in various ways. It took me a long time to get to the place where I knew what I wanted. In college, my degree was really defined by my love of chemistry and math, and I ended up getting a chemical engineering degree. And I think what attracted me about that was the problem solving aspect of engineering. I love to solve problems. I love to be challenged, and that was a good fit. It wasn't until my senior year that I realized I didn't want to work in a factory at a chemical plant, and I actually was recruited by a consulting firm, Anderson Consulting, which ultimately became Accenture. And that had the problem solving aspect, but also, instead of working in a plant, you were working in an office, you were working for the client, you were solving client problems and working on projects. And so that was a really good fit. That got me closer to the ideal. I spent 5 years at Accenture and ultimately realized I liked it, but I hadn't quite found my calling, and decided to go get an MBA and figure it out. And so I got to Kellogg at Northwestern in Chicago area, and started exploring a lot of different things. And one area that intrigued me was investment banking. I didn't know anything about it, but I decided to apply for some internships. And when I did it, I got laughed out of the room by all of the major investment banks except for one, and it happened to be Lehman Brothers. And for some reason, it just clicked.
Can I just ask you, Chad, why were you being laughed out of the room?
Well, I didn't know anything about banking. I think the people who are really committed to banking, they've kind of made it their life goal to do that. And I was still looking at management consulting. I was looking at real estate investing, real estate development. I was looking at all different things. So I just didn't have the time to spend doing all the legwork that people who were absolutely committed to investment banking were doing. And so I didn't stand out. And they asked me basic questions. I didn't know the answers. And I don't know why it was different with Lehman, but we clicked. The CEO of Lehman actually came to Kellogg and gave a speech, and I didn't go to that because I was distracted with other things. I'm very, very fortunate they didn't ask me that, because that would have been a clear ding. But we clicked, and it made sense. I got an offer, and I showed up in New York having no idea what investment banking was, and absolutely loved it. And thought it was the most incredible thing. It was everything I loved about engineering, the problem solving. I loved everything about the project-based work and working with clients. But unlike consulting, it was very strategic. It was very financial, and it tied everything together. And in a lot of ways, I found my calling. Happenstance, but found my calling in banking, and absolutely loved my summer. Worked extremely hard. Never wanted to leave the office, and just soaked it in. And was fortunate at the end of that summer to get a full-time offer.
Outstanding. And then just if we're, to rewind time and to think, okay, you're now at Lehman, tell me a little bit about kind of the career path that saw you coming into Peak Technology Partners as a managing partner?
Yeah, so I spent nearly 10 years at Lehman Brothers, which became Barclays Capital, which is a whole nother story, but quite a roller coaster ride. But I was there for nearly 10 years. Incredible people, incredible opportunities, worked on big, high profile deals, really fun to read about them in the Wall Street Journal. But the role that I played was pretty small. Obviously, as an associate, worked my way up. I was a very small piece of the overall team. And I think over time, I realized I wanted to play a bigger impact and a bigger role. At this time, also, investment banking, there was a lot of pushback in the public sentiment about investment banking. And this was the time where Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and there was this sentiment that bankers were greedy and incentivized for short-term success, and they were, didn't care about the future, and so there's a lot of pushback, and it didn't feel great. And I was looking for something that was a little bit more fulfilling. I loved banking, I loved transactions, but I was looking for something more fulfilling. And toward my end, my career at Barclays Capital, they offered me a transfer to California to focus exclusively on the technology space. And part of that transition was working with earlier stage, high growth technology companies. And that was a better fit. And over time, I just gravitated toward earlier stage companies in the Bay Area. I was really embraced the entrepreneurial spirit that resides here, the technology focus, and just I love the atmosphere. And ultimately left Barclays. I started my own company. It was a online fundraising platform for public schools, and got startup experience, and worked on that for a year. It was an incredible learning experience that ultimately, wasn't successful beyond just developing the product and doing a few trial runs, but learned a ton about, and really fell in love with the entrepreneurial spirit. And from there went to a boutique investment bank, and that's where I learned the model that we employ today at Peak. That's where we work with bootstrapped, founder-led technology companies. We help them raise capital or sell, and there I found everything I loved about banking, but it had a heart. It was helping the little guy realize value. And ultimately, I was there working with a couple of other bankers, and we were effectively running that firm, but it was someone else's firm. And we looked at each other and said, "Why are we doing this for someone else? Why not go and start our own?" And that was the genesis of Peak. Those were my two co-founders, and it took a year or two to get the wheels in motion. But by 2016, we started Peak. It was a crazy start where, it was, you're sitting down, you're picking the name, you're building the website, you are figuring out
Your company building, I mean, it's a startup in and of itself, isn't it?
it was a complete startup. And unlike my first startup where I was doing something that wasn't core to my experience set, this was right down the middle of the fairway to what I was doing, and perfectly aligned with my interests and my strengths. And I pulled in two phenomenal co-founders, and the three of us just put our heads down, and we worked to build the business. It was, the most difficult time for a startup is in the first couple of years. And they say if you can get through those first couple of years, your chance of success skyrockets. But the likelihood of being successful is very low. There's a lot of failures, and the first couple of years were very challenging. And we were extremely fortunate. We signed up our first client in December of 2016, and we were fortunate to close that deal, our very first client, in May. And so 6 months later, we had a success fee that allowed us to pay the bills and keep the lights on for the first year and a half. And that was extremely fortunate, because in the early days, we were building a brand, we were building a company, we're figuring out our 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 processes and our workflows, and we were figuring out client selection, which is incredibly important. And when you're new, you almost have to take on anything, and that can really hurt you if you take on deals that are less likely to close, you can literally work yourself to death. And so we were lucky with that first one. We learned the hard way on client selection, and over time we got better and better, and slowly started to grow. And so that's what led me to Peak. It was ultimately certainly not the most direct way, but I learned from every step, and I believe it's helped me become the banker that I am today, and helped us ultimately be successful where we are in 2022, and grown to 22 bankers, nearly 30 people, and four offices across the U.S. and very active even in a challenging market like today's market.
Well, it's a tremendous success story by any benchmark, and I would just be curious to receive your perspective as you kind of look back on the trajectory that Peak has been on since you closed that first deal in early 2017. What you think the key attributes or the key aspects were that have informed Peak's ability to be successful. Obviously, in the technology world, it's been when he started in market in 2016, it was quite an amazing time to start given the boom years that we had from 2016 through 2021. But I'm particularly curious now looking back, if you might reflect on what you think informed that success.
I think one of the keys to our success is, I mean, we had great backgrounds, a great experience, but because we started a new firm, we were really out to prove ourselves. And so we had the experience in the background, but we also had the motivation and the incentive, and really just we felt we had to prove ourselves to the world. And so I believe we truly worked harder than anyone else. And you know, every deal to us mattered. And to date, we've closed 40 deals since inception. We have 38 stories where deals have been up and down. And if we had taken more of a portfolio approach where, hey, we'll take on these 5 deals, and if 2 of them are good, great, and if 3 fail, we don't care, we never would have seen the success that we've seen. I think a critical piece of that was never giving up on a deal. I mean, client selection is really important, but once you take on a client, you really have to see it through, and you have to be creative, you have to be resilient, you have to have grit and see it through to the end. Not every deal is successful, but we gave 110% to figure out if there was a deal to be done in the market. And initially that was us individually executing our own deals, and over time we grew and expanded the team, and were able to to do more and leverage that. But ultimately every deal matters to us, and every we just don't give up on deals.
So I want to double click on this whole topic of client selection because of course, when you're
Yeah.
selling professional services, which that is investment banking, there's only so many hours in the day, and there are true opportunity costs associated
Yep.
to picking up a new mandate, especially if that commitment involves it's an all-in effort to try and get a given deal closed once you pick up that mandate. What has your experience been within Peak regarding trying to suss out, the wheat from the chaff and the truly great opportunities from those opportunities that might very well become a waste of time?
Yeah, it's client selection is critical, and a great deal might take a certain amount of work, and a good deal probably takes 3x, 4x, 5x the number of hours to get that closed. And a mediocre deal can be multiples of that. So you can literally, if you take on 5 mediocre deals, you can work yourself to death and not make any money, because our fees are success based. So if we don't close a deal, we don't make any money. And so client selection is absolutely critical. It's hard. I mean, if I knew perfectly what companies would be successful, I would be an investor, right? I would be a phenomenally successful investor, and I wouldn't be an advisor, because I don't know. That's part of the experience set that we've built over time to get better and better at this. But it's hard because the reason I love this job is I love working with founders. And when I hear their stories, I really want them to succeed and I want to help them succeed. And it's easy to fall in love with a story and want to do anything you can to help them. And so it's really important to have some checks and balances. And we've set up a client selection committee that will help because my co-founders and other leaders in the firm can weigh in, and they don't have that same relationship that I have with the prospective client, and they can help balance my perspective
Right.
and ask the hard questions of, yeah, I realize this is a great story and I realize you really want to do this, but have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And that helps us stay grounded. We've also created metrics and a scorecard that would say, all right, these are the factors that lead to successful outcomes, and it's the strength of the team. It's have they had inbound interest? Is the industry attractive? What's their competitive moat? And all these are sort of qualitative, but if you can score those and put it all together, it can help you make a qualitative assessment of whether to take on a deal or not. And so all those things have helped, but it's hard, and we're not perfect. We can't get every deal across the finish line, but when we successfully as we improve our client selection process, everything gets better. We close more deals. The amount of time that we have to spend working on a deal, goes down. And it's important to recognize in a services business you've got limited capacity. We work with these amazing technology companies that are so scalable. Our business is only scalable to the extent that we either become more efficient, which is possible, but there's a limit to that, and to the extent we add more people, and so there's a limited number of deals that you can take on in any given point in time, and so you have to be very selective. You have to understand your strengths, and you have to be careful not to fall in love with a company, and when you do, make sure you got checks and balances.
No, it's so interesting because I think when you couple that with just how quickly the company or the firm has grown over the last 6 years, with 40 transactions now under your belt, like the other question that comes to my mind is this notion of capacity and capacity management, right? Because the firm has grown so quickly, and there's probably a positive momentum associated with that as well, where you have founders that have had successful experiences working with Peak and they're out there singing their praises. So you're receiving inbound referrals now. How do you manage that? I mean, how do you forecast capacity requirements within the firm to make sure that you're in a position to absorb that demand as it continues to grow?
Yeah, it's a constant challenge, and we're certainly trying to build the brand and encourage those types of referrals, and that's certainly gotten easier as we've grown and scaled. I think it's been really critical. One thing that we've done, um, we've never been big enough to have a dedicated staffer, and we wanted to make sure that everyone came on had a positive experience, and to make sure they were mentored and given the right amount of work to do. We split up into separate pods, separate teams that could, so you get the benefit of working at a larger organization, but your working team is smaller, and so we've been able to scale that way, making sure that people we hire have a positive experience and they have ability to grow and learn. But I think the other secret has been I never wanted to run a firm. I want to do deals, and I want to create an organization where everyone who works here is just as motivated as I am to do deals, and no one needs to be babysat. And we don't track hours worked, we don't track vacations taken. We really do compensate for performance, and it's a very entrepreneurial feel. And what that enables is it encourages people to stay. So we've had incredible retention. We're 30 people, and in 6 years, we've had a couple people let go, and we've had a couple people leave for other opportunities. So we've lost four.
That's remarkable, Chad.
And in investment banking, which is incredible turnover, it is. so it's a place where people want to work, and the reason is because of the culture, because it's very entrepreneurial, and we reward for performance, and so I don't need to get on anyone's case about taking time off. If they want to take time off, they can take time off. But if they have a deal to be done and they close that deal, they will be rewarded. And so I want everyone to feel that, feel like an owner, feel motivated, and feel part of a team. And that allows you to scale. So as more deals and need to add capacity, A, you're not losing people, so you're not having to replace that. But B, we all have friends that are in banking, and we can reach out and we can encourage them to come in. There's a lot of great talent, and we're very selective. We want to bring in people that will fit in well with our culture. But it's easy to do when you reward people, when you set them up for success, and you've got a track record like we do in retaining people. So that's what's helped us manage our capacity, and still, still we've grown tremendously, and we're actively hiring for several positions, and it's always a challenge. It's an important part of our growth, and it's an important part to make sure we have the capacity to get the deals done that are coming through the door.
Hearing you speak, Chad, it strikes me that the way that you talk about Peak is where Peak is a platform in and of itself for other bankers to build their careers.
Yeah.
And I find that unique because in the long tail of investment banks, so kind of roughly, sole proprietorships to 50 or 60 people, you tend to run into a number of dynamics where, for a variety of reasons, the leadership of that investment banking boutique doesn't necessarily have kind of those types of scale aspirations
Yeah.
that I'm hearing coming from you, and what's clearly evident by Peak's growth over the last number of years. What do you think differentiates Peak from that perspective, kind of this gumption or desire to truly scale and become a platform in and of itself for other investment banking professionals?
Well, I think we saw firsthand the dangers of being the opposite. So, where I met my two co-founders of the previous firm, it had one owner, and it was built all around him, and others were a part of it, but it was always his firm. And ultimately, it was very successful. It existed for 20 years, but when he was ready to retire, that was it, and they closed up shop, and they're done, and they don't exist anymore. And and I think in a lot of ways that was very limiting. I was a part of that platform for about a year, but I never felt like it was mine, and I didn't have the incentive to stay on. And what we wanted to create, we saw firsthand that, and we wanted to do the opposite. We wanted to create a platform where people love to come and can feel like it's theirs and feel like they can grow. And our goal, we believe that if the way to optimize our outcome is to encourage that growth and encourage others to be successful. We believe that by all of us being successful, I can be more successful by helping others to be successful. And so we build a firm that does that, where people are encouraged to and motivated and know that they can be successful. We're willing to share in that success. And ultimately, I think we'll be better off because we'll be a bigger firm, we'll build the brand. And ultimately, when I'm ready to retire, I think it'll be a strong, healthy place with lots of great people ready to step in and continue on. So I truly believe that it will live on well beyond the three founders, and I'm excited by that.
It's great to hear. I mean, I know we've spent a bit of time going through Peak's internal dynamics, but I think the benefit of that is also just an observation that when you as a firm fully embody a certain set of values, those values inherently are going to impact the client relationship, and the clients will see that as being an authentic reflection of how you want to operate in the market, because that's how you treat your colleagues. Tell me a little bit about some representative transactions that you've worked on over the years that you've been at Peak, and the extent to which this differentiation that you're articulating has also impacted the client relationship in a positive way.
I think trust is really important, not only internally but externally. And we're building a firm where we're creating a reputation for being trustworthy and fair. When you're trying to get a transaction done and you're negotiating, you're my goal is to get the best possible deal for my client. And on the other side of the table, you've got buyers, investors that are trying to get the best deal for their investors, their LPs. And trust is really important. And oftentimes you'll get yourself in a situation where there's an incentive for you to exaggerate the truth or say something that's not true to try to get a better outcome for your client. And our goal is to get the best deal, but our goal is also to negotiate in a fair manner where at the end of the day, when the dust settles, we want the other parties to look at us and say, all right, they were aggressive, but they were fair. And when you do that, you build up a reputation for being trustworthy. And so we've got, we now have 40 transactions under a belt. We've got counterparties that know us and know that when we tell them, hey, you've got to be at this price, otherwise you're not going to be successful here. They know that we're not just making that up, and that we're being serious. So I think we believe in being honest, transparent to a degree. We believe in being in integrity, and when you conduct yourself internally and externally that way, you build a reputation for that, and that actually helps you deliver better outcomes because you've got the other party, the other side understands that they understand how you operate, and it builds your credibility, and it allows you to get to an outcome that is optimal for both parties.
Yeah, I love that because ultimately, not just in professional services actually, but in any service that you're selling, whether it's software or professional services, that authenticity of those values and the way it comes through in the product or the solution, I think is incredibly important. I think the world is hungry for that. Any specific transactions that you'd like to want to highlight as kind of being marquee transactions or otherwise representative of the types of deals that Peak has closed in recent years?
Yeah, I'll highlight maybe a couple that are highlight the differences between some deals. I mentioned previously we've got 40 deals under our belt. 38 of them have these stories where it was up and down. We do have a couple of deals where it felt like it just went everything went exactly as planned, and one of those was a software business called FitPay that we sold to Garmin. Garmin, on their high-end watches, they have Garmin Pay application, and it allows you to use the Garmin watch to pay at a convenience store or gas station. And the software that powers that was FitPay, and so Garmin was FitPay's number one customer, and we were hired to sell FitPay, and we got hired on a Friday. We immediately approached. We had 20 or so targets. Garmin was one of our first calls. They immediately, over the weekend, gave us a term sheet. We told them that was interesting, but not high enough to preempt our process. And we told them we had the 20 calls we'd made. We'd already set up meetings with 15 of them, and they came back to us within 24 hours with they increased their offer by 50%. And then we told them, all right, that's good enough. We'll shut down the process. So we went exclusive with Garmin within days of launching, and 6 weeks to the day that we got hired, we closed that deal with Garmin. So they were phenomenal to work with. The corp dev team there was fantastic, very understanding, very helpful, and it was a great fit. They already knew each other well, and so the diligence went quickly, and I wish every deal was exactly like that. I mean, 6 weeks is very, very quick to get a deal done, but it was a fantastic outcome. I'll contrast that with another deal that we closed earlier this year. a company called Gummy Cube. Gummy Cube was actually our sixth client that we ever signed up. We signed them up early in 2017. We met them at a conference in San Francisco, and we brought them to market. We didn't get the price, the valuation that they were hoping for, but we got great feedback from the market. We made it very clear what they needed to do, and over the course of 5 years, they continued to build the business. They addressed those issues, and we brought them back to market this year, and sold them to a strategic. And it was a great fit, fantastic outcome, and ultimately a much better deal than we could have gotten 5 years ago. But that's the other extreme, a deal that was 5 years in the making, but an example of one that we didn't give up, and we stuck with them, and we listened to the market. We learned from it, and when we came back out, we were much better prepared, and were able to deliver a great outcome that has worked out very well for the team.
Two very different but very, I think, validating stories that speak to Peak's success over the last number of years. Any exciting plans that the team has over the coming number of months and as we head into 2023 that you'd like to share?
Well, we were virtual from the beginning, and just when COVID hit, we were planning to get transition to offices, and that delayed those plans significantly. We made it work, remaining virtual up until the beginning of 2022 this year. And we quickly went from 0 to 4 offices. And I think we're doubling down on building out the office and building a culture. It's such a mentorship business. So we're currently looking for a flagship office in San Francisco. We were touring some spots last week. We found a great one, and we're negotiating and trying to lock that down. And that will be a great place for us to continue to build the team here in San Francisco, and be able to come together and share best practices and really establish ourselves here in the Bay Area. So super excited about the future, excited to continue to grow the team, and very excited for the market to improve and keep this party going.
I'm super excited for you guys. It's been and this is coming from someone that's we've been scaling our own business, and I know what a wild ride that can be, and just really happy to see all of the success that you're starting to garner in the market. So congratulations and kudos to you and the broader Peak Technology Partners team. Chad, it's been great having you on, and very much looking forward to continuing the conversation in the days ahead.
It's been great. Thank you. And we've loved our relationship with Finalis. It's an example of the types of companies that we'd love to represent. They're using technology to innovate in their space. And I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. And it's a well-needed change in the broker-dealer space. And we're excited to see continue to cheer your success and watch you grow.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chad.
All right. Thanks, Fed.
Finalis is a broker-dealer platform with everything that M&A advisors, investment bankers, and placement agents need to succeed. We deliver a broker-in-a-box regulatory affiliation solution, replete with tech-enabled compliance, research and analytics, deal lifecycle management tools, and a first-of-its-kind deal marketplace. Learn more at www.finalis.com. You've been listening to Pencils Down, a Finalis podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. That helps us keep covering the latest in the private securities brokerage landscape. Thanks for listening. Until next time.